You have been trying to become someone your entire life, and I want you to hear something tonight that may unsettle you before it sets you free. It has not worked. Not the resolutions, not the journals you started and abandoned, not the promises you whispered to yourself at 2 in the morning when the house was quiet and you were alone with the version of yourself you do not show anyone. You have tried to be more disciplined, more confident, more focused, more something, and for a few days, maybe a few weeks, it almost feels real. You feel the momentum building. You think, this time it is different. This time I will not go back. And then, quietly, without announcement, without any single moment you can point to and say, that is where it fell apart, you drift back. Same patterns, same doubts. Same heaviness sitting on your chest like a stone you cannot name. Same face in the mirror that does not quite feel like the person you know you are supposed to be. And the worst part is not the failure. You could handle the failure. The worst part is the question you are afraid to ask out loud. The one that visits you at 3 in the morning when sleep will not come. What if I am simply not capable of being that person? What if the distance between who I am and who I want to be is a distance I will never cross? I need you to hear me carefully. There is nothing wrong with you. You have never been broken. Not once, not ever, but you have been given the wrong instructions. And tonight, I want to show you why everything you have tried has carried you further from the very person you are trying to reach. This is not another list of habits. This is not about doing more, adding more, fixing more of what was never damaged in the first place. What I am going to share with you is far simpler and far more frightening than any of that. Because what if the reason it has never worked is not that you are weak or lazy or incapable, but that you have been solving the wrong problem entirely? Stay with me, this matters. The world has taught you that becoming your best self is a construction project. Add discipline, add confidence. Add morning routines and evening rituals and affirmations you repeat into a mirror, hoping that if you say them enough times, they will finally feel true. Add accountability partners and vision boards and 5-year plans. Keep building, keep adding, keep improving. Stack enough layers of improvement, and eventually, someday, you will arrive at the person you were always meant to be. But you have been adding, and adding, and adding, and you are exhausted, and you are no closer. You know this. You feel it in that particular kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with sleep. The tiredness of effort that leads nowhere. The tiredness of running with everything you have on a road that never ends. So here is the thing no one has told you. You do not need to become someone new. You may simply need to stop pretending to be someone you are not. There is an ancient idea, far older than any self-help book, older than any productivity system or 10-step program, that says the truest version of you is not something you build. It is something you uncover. The way a sculptor stands before a block of raw marble and does not add clay to create a masterpiece. He removes, he chips away everything that is not the statue, everything that does not belong, and what remains when he is finished is what was always there, waiting inside the stone. Michelangelo was once asked how he created his David, that towering figure of beauty and strength from a shapeless block of rock, and what he said has stayed with me ever since. He said, "I did not create David. David was already inside the stone. I simply removed everything that was not him." What if the same is true for you? Not that you need to add more, but that you need to stop carrying what was never yours. But who is this person you have always wanted to be? This is a question worth sitting with. Not the version on the vision board, not the curated image, not the fantasy of some future self with the perfect career and the perfect body and the perfect confidence. That is not who you are longing for. The person you have always wanted to be is not someone with a different life. The person you have always wanted to be is simply you, at ease, you without the weight, you without the masks. You without the constant, exhausting performance of being someone you assembled from other people's expectations and other people's fears. You have felt this before. You know exactly who I am describing. And I want you to know something. It is not selfish to want to feel at home in your own life. That longing is not weakness. It is the most natural, the most sacred ache a human being can carry. Now, let me tell you a story, because everything I have just said, you may understand it with your mind. But this story will help you feel it somewhere deeper than the mind has ever been. In 1957, in a small monastery in Bangkok, a group of monks were given what seemed like a simple task. They needed to relocate a clay Buddha statue from one building to another. It was a large statue, nearly 10 feet tall, but unremarkable, clay, ordinary, weathered by centuries of rain and heat and the slow passage of time. Monks had sat in silence before it for generations. Visitors bowed out of routine. No one thought much of it anymore. It was familiar the way old things become familiar, loved but unseen. So they brought a crane. And when the cables pulled tight and the statue rose into the air, something went wrong. The statue was far heavier than anyone had calculated, impossibly heavy for clay. The crane strained. The cables groaned. And then, with a sound that stopped every monk in his tracks, a crack split open along the surface of the Buddha. They set it down immediately. They covered it in heavy cloth to shield it from the coming rain. They would deal with it in the morning. But that night a young monk could not sleep. The crack troubled him. So he took a flashlight and walked out alone through the rain. He knelt in the wet grass beside the statue, pulled back the cloth, and pointed his light into the crack. He only wanted to see how deep the damage went. And through that narrow opening, something caught the beam of his flashlight, something impossible, a gleam, a warmth, a color that clay has never been. He brought the light closer. His hands were trembling now. Gold. Not a fleck, not a decoration, a solid, unbroken surface of pure gold shining beneath the clay, as if it had been waiting there, glowing patiently in the dark, for someone to finally look. Over the next several days, the monks removed the clay, piece by piece, layer by careful layer, with a reverence you give to something holy. And what emerged beneath their hands was one of the largest solid gold statues ever discovered. 5.5 tons of pure gold, nearly 10 feet tall, so beautiful that people wept the first time they saw it. Not because it was valuable, because it was true. Historians pieced together what had happened. Centuries before, a different group of monks had learned that an invading army was approaching. They knew the soldiers would loot the monastery. They knew the gold would be stolen, so they made a decision. They covered the entire statue in clay. They disguised the most precious thing they had as the most ordinary thing in the room, and it worked. The invaders came, glanced at the clay figure, and moved on. But those monks were killed, every one of them, and the secret of the gold died with them. For hundreds of years after generation of monks lived alongside a treasure they never knew was there. They brought offerings to the clay. They prayed before the clay. They were certain the clay was all there was. And the whole time, beneath their hands, beneath their devotion, beneath centuries of unknowing, the gold waited, patient, undiminished. The way something true waits when it knows it cannot be destroyed, only hidden. Let that settle for a moment. The statue did not need to be made golden. It was already golden. It had been golden the entire time. For hundreds of years it was golden. The only thing between the gold and the world was a layer of clay that someone else had put on it. Now I need to ask you something that may be uncomfortable. What if you are that statue? What if every attempt you have made to improve yourself, to build a better version of who you are, was simply pressing more clay onto gold? Another layer of should, another coat of must. Another shell of this is who I need to be in order to be loved, to be accepted, to be safe, to be enough. And underneath it all, untouched, undamaged, shining in the dark, the real you, waiting. You know, you are not the clay. You were never the clay. So then what is the clay? What are these layers? Let us look together, gently, the way those monks removed the clay from the statue, not with force, with care. The first layer is the clay of other people's expectations. You learned early, so early you may not even remember learning it, what made people smile at you, what earned you approval, what kept you safe from disappointment or anger or the quiet withdrawal of love, and you shaped yourself accordingly, not because you were weak, because you were brilliant. A child who learns what earns love is a child who is doing exactly what survival requires. That intelligence saved you, but you are not that child anymore. And the shape you carved yourself into to survive may not be the shape that allows you to live. The second layer is the clay of fear. Somewhere along the way, and you may not remember exactly when, you made a quiet decision. You decided it was safer to be small than to be seen. Safer to be cynical than to hope. Safer to never reach than to reach and be told your hands are empty. So you built walls, and over time you forgot they were walls. You called them your personality. You built a cage with a lock on the inside and called it being realistic. You stopped raising your hand. You stopped saying the things you actually felt. You stopped dreaming out loud because the last time you were fully, openly, vulnerably yourself, something happened that taught you never to do that again. And so the clay went on. One more layer, then another, then another. Those layers protected you once. But protection and imprisonment are not the same thing, and somewhere along the way, one became the other. The third layer is the clay of borrowed dreams, and this one is quiet. This one hides well. Ask yourself honestly, how many of the goals you are chasing right now did you actually choose? How many were placed into your hands by parents, by culture, by a society that profits from your dissatisfaction, and you simply carried them forward without ever asking whether they were yours? You have been climbing a ladder your entire adult life. Have you ever once stopped to look up and ask whether it is leaning against the right wall? You have felt this. I know you have. That bone-deep exhaustion that is not about the body, the tiredness of living in a house that looks beautiful from the street but feels empty when you close the door. A professor once visited a Zen master seeking wisdom. The master offered tea. He poured and poured until the cup overflowed, tea spilling across the table and onto the floor. The professor cried out, "Stop, the cup is already full." And the master set the pot down and said, "You are like this cup, so full of your own opinions and borrowed identities that nothing true can enter. How can I show you who you really are until you first empty what does not belong? You have spent years filling yourself. Perhaps the most courageous thing you could do tonight is ask what needs to be poured out. This is what the world gets wrong when it tells you to become your best self. Becoming means adding, but you are already full, overflowing with things that are not yours. The work is not to become. The work is to unbecome, to gently, patiently strip away everything that was never you, until what is left is gold. Even Marcus Aurelius understood this. A Roman emperor, one of the most powerful men who ever lived, used to sit alone by candlelight and write in a journal no one was meant to read. And one of the things he wrote was simply this: strip away the legend that encrusts you. If a man who ruled the known world understood that the layers must come off, then perhaps you can give yourself permission to believe the same. And that is exactly what I want to give you: permission. Every layer of clay you ever put on served a purpose. You were not foolish to wear them. You were protecting something precious. You were hiding the gold so it would not be stolen. But the invasion is over now. The army has moved on. The danger has passed. And the clay that once kept you safe is now the only thing keeping the world from seeing who you actually are. So here is what this looks like in your real life. Not in theory, not in philosophy, in the ordinary moments that make up your days. I want you to think of a time when you felt completely yourself. No mask, no performance, no effort. Maybe you were laughing so freely that you forgot anyone was watching. Maybe you were creating something and time simply disappeared. Maybe you were sitting somewhere quiet and felt a peace settle over you that had no reason and no explanation. Or maybe it was smaller than that, a single honest sentence, a moment of unexpected tenderness. A night when you looked up at something vast and felt, without needing to think it, that you were enough. That was not a lucky day. That was not a rare accident. That was the gold shining through a crack in the clay. That ease you felt, that aliveness, that was not a special version of you. That was the real one. Can you feel something shifting even now? Something softening in your chest? That is not my doing. That is you, hearing a truth your body has always known. Here is why those moments were so brief. Not because the gold comes and goes, but because every time you caught a glimpse of who you really are, you did not have permission to stay. So let me give you that permission now. You are allowed to be the person you are when no one is watching. You are allowed to want what you actually want and not what you were trained to want. You are allowed to be gentle in a world that mistakes gentleness for weakness. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to disappoint anyone who only ever loved the clay. You are allowed to walk away from any room, any role, any life that requires you to be someone other than who you are. You do not have to earn the right to be yourself. That right was yours before anyone ever handed you a mask, before the first layer of clay was pressed into place. And nothing that has happened to you, nothing that was done to you, nothing that you have done has ever taken that right away. Now here is what I would ask of you. Not something dramatic, something quiet, something you can begin tonight. Notice the clay. Once a day, just once, catch yourself in the act of performing, not to punish yourself, simply to see. Ah, there it is. That is the mask going on. That is the voice I use when I am trying to be liked. That is the smile I give when I do not mean it. You might notice it at work when you agree with something you do not believe. You might notice it at home when you swallow something that needed to be said. Just notice. That is enough. Because awareness is the flashlight in the dark monastery. You cannot remove what you have never allowed yourself to see. And then honor the cracks. The moments when the real you slips through. Stop sealing them shut. That sudden swell of tears at an unexpected kindness. Do not apologize for it. That laugh that comes out louder than you planned. Do not quiet it. That dream that refuses to die no matter how many times you have called it foolish, stop calling it foolish. Those cracks are sacred. They are where your gold shines through. They are the most honest thing about you. And finally, before you add one more thing to yourself, one more goal, one more resolution, one more version of who you think you should be, stop and ask a single question. Am I moving toward the gold? Or am I pressing on more clay? You have always wanted to be this person. Listen to that word. Always. Not since last year. Not since your last heartbreak. Always. Since you were a child who had not yet learned to hide. That longing has lived inside you your entire life. And the fact that it has never gone quiet, that nothing you have tried has ever fully silenced it, is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is the most important thing about you. It is the gold calling from beneath the surface. You are not chasing something you have never had. You are trying to find your way back to something you have always been. Now, before you go tonight, I want to return to Bangkok one last time, because there is one part of this story I have saved for the end, and it may matter more than everything else I have said. The monks did not find the gold because they went looking for it. No one suspected it was there. No one launched a search. They found it because the statue cracked. The very thing they feared, the damage, the breaking, the flaw they tried to prevent, was the thing that revealed the truth. It was not perfection that uncovered the gold, it was the crack. So, perhaps the cracks in your life, the failures you carry, the heartbreaks that reshaped you, the nights you came apart and were not sure you could put yourself back together, perhaps those were never punishments. Perhaps they were never proof that you are not enough. Perhaps every single one of them was an invitation, the universe pressing gently against the clay and whispering, "Look closer, there is gold in here." In winter, a river does not stop flowing because ice covers its surface. The water is still there, still alive, still moving beneath the cold. Your true self works the same way. The hard seasons of your life, the frozen years, they did not destroy who you are. They only covered the surface. And surfaces always, eventually, thaw. You do not need another book. You do not need another year. You do not need to be fixed, because you were never broken. You are covered. And the difference between those two things is everything. I once heard about a woman who spent 15 years in a career she never chose. 15 years of early mornings in someone else's life. And when she was asked why she finally walked away, she did not say she found something better. She said, "I stopped being able to pretend it was mine." That was her crack. That was her gold, refusing to stay hidden for one more day. And on the other side of that terrifying honesty, she did not find a new self. She found the original one, the one that had been there all along, patient and whole, beneath 15 years of clay. The person you have always wanted to be is not waiting for you at the end of some distant road. They are not 5 years away. They are not on the other side of one more self-improvement program. They are here, in this room, in this breath, listening to these words right now. And the fact that something in you recognized what you heard tonight, that something in you leaned forward and whispered, "Yes, that is true, that is what I have always known," that recognition is the gold. Seeing itself clearly, perhaps for the first time, you did not find this by accident. Something beneath the clay heard its own name and answered. How do you become the person you have always wanted to be? You stop trying to become, and you begin, with great gentleness, to remember. You crack the clay, you let the gold breathe, and you discover that you were never as far from yourself as you feared. You were always right here, underneath it all, whole. You have permission to stop building and start uncovering. You have permission to disappoint anyone who needs the clay version of you. You have permission to be, fully and without apology, the person you already are, the one who has waited so long, so patiently, for you to finally come home. The gold is there. It has always been there. And now you know. May you walk forward from this moment, not as someone who needs to change, but as someone who finally remembers who they have been all along. Carry this with you tonight, not as a thought, as a feeling, the warmth of the gold beneath the surface, alive and patient, waiting for you to live as though you know it is there. Because you do now, you do. If something in this reached you, leave one word in the comments. Gold, just that, so that others who are searching will see it and know they are not alone. And so that you in this moment can say to yourself quietly, honestly, I heard it, I felt it, and I am ready to remember.